all started with a glance, a brief, seemingly insignificant moment on the platform of the subway late one night. The man in the rumpled gray suit didn't stand out at first. Just another commuter blending into the fluorescent-lit chaos of the station. But then his eyes locked onto mine, and it was as if he could see right through me, past the exhaustion, past the facade I wore, straight into the desperation I'd been trying to bury. "Excuse me," he said, stepping closer. His voice was calm, smooth, and disarming. "Do you have a minute?" I didn't. I barely had enough time for myself between working late shifts at a dead-end job and dodging calls from debt collectors. But there was something in his tone, something magnetic, that made me pause. "I'm not interested," I replied instinctively, my voice curt, but not as firm as I'd intended. He smiled, small and knowing, like he had heard this response 100 times before. "Are you sure? What I'm offering could change your life." I let out a dry laugh. "Unless you're handing me a briefcase of cash, I doubt you can help." Without a word, he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a sleek rectangular card. He held it out to me, his fingers steady, as if he knew I wouldn't be able to resist taking it. The card was strange, minimalist, almost sterile. On one side, there was a simple design, a circle, a triangle, and a square, stacked neatly atop one another. On the other side was a phone number in bold black print. No name, no company logo, just the number. "No tricks," he said, stepping back. "Just call if you're interested. We're looking for players." Before I could respond, the subway roared into the station, and the man disappeared into the crowd. For days, the card sat on my coffee table, its glossy surface catching the dim light of my apartment. I told myself to throw it away, but I couldn't. It was as if the card had a weight to it, a pull that I couldn't ignore. Each time I passed by, I caught myself glancing at it, my mind racing with possibilities and doubts. At first, I chalked it up to curiosity, but as the days dragged on and my situation worsened, curiosity gave way to something darker, desperation. My landlord had stopped being polite about late rent payments. My credit cards were maxed out, and the collection agencies had started calling my workplace. I was drowning, and no matter how hard I paddled, I couldn't keep my head above water. Late one night, with a bottle of cheap whiskey as my only companion, I finally caved. I picked up the card, my fingers trembling, and dialed the number. The line clicked after the first ring. "Are you calling to play?" The voice on the other end was calm and professional, almost robotic. "Play what?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "Games," the voice replied. "Do you accept?" "I don't even know what this is," I stammered, my pulse quickening. "You'll find out soon enough," the voice said. "Do you accept?" I hesitated. Everything about this felt wrong. But then I thought about my landlord, the collection agencies, the pile of bills I couldn't pay. I thought about how tired I was of struggling, of scraping by with no end in sight. "Yes," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Good," the voice replied. "Be ready tomorrow at 9 p.m. A vehicle will pick you up." The line went dead before I could ask anything else. The black van arrived exactly on time. Its windows were tinted so dark I couldn't see inside. When the door slid open, I hesitated, standing there on the curb like an idiot. A figure in a crimson jumpsuit and a featureless black mask motioned for me to get in. Something about the blankness of the mask unsettled me, but before I could second-guess myself, I climbed inside. The interior of the van was cold and sterile, with rows of identical seats. I wasn't alone. About a dozen other people sat in silence, their faces pale and tense. Nobody made eye contact. The air was thick with unease, the kind that comes when strangers are thrust into a situation they don't understand. We rode in silence for what felt like hours. The windows were blacked out, so I had no sense of where we were going. Eventually, the van came to a stop, and we were herded out into a massive underground facility. The scale of the place was overwhelming. Stark white walls stretched endlessly, illuminated by harsh fluorescent lights. Cameras hung in every corner, their lenses tracking our every move. They stripped us of our clothes and gave us identical green tracksuits, each with a number sewn onto the chest. Mine was 456. I glanced around at the others. Some looked angry, others scared. A few seemed disturbingly calm. The first game was deceptively simple. Red light, green light. They led us into a cavernous room painted to look like a child's playground. At the far end stood a massive, cartoonish doll, its head swiveling back and forth. The rules were explained in a monotone voice. Move when the doll says green light. Stop when it says red light. I remember thinking it was absurd, but when the first player moved during red light and the sound of a gunshot echoed through the room, the absurdity turned to horror. The man dropped to the ground, blood pooling around him. The realization hit us all at once. This wasn't a game. It was an execution. Panic erupted. People ran, screamed, begged for mercy. Those who broke the rules were gunned down without hesitation. The rest of us froze, too terrified to move. When the doll called green light again, I forced myself to walk, each step feeling like it could be my last. The days that followed blurred into a nightmare. Each game was a twisted version of something from childhood. Tug of war over a pit of spikes. A game of marbles where the loser forfeited their life. The organizers watched us with cold detachment, their masks hiding any hint of humanity. I tried to keep my head down, to avoid drawing attention, but alliances formed quickly and betrayals followed just as fast. I saw people I'd started to trust turn on each other in desperation. Some players seemed to relish the chaos, their survival instincts overriding any sense of morality. One night, during the brief hours we were allowed to rest, a riot broke out. Players attacked each other in the dark, their silhouettes illuminated by the flickering lights. I spent the night huddled in a corner, clutching a makeshift weapon, praying I'd make it to morning. By the time we reached the final game, there were only a handful of us left. The prize money, an obscene amount of cash displayed in a glass case, hung over us like a cruel joke. The organizers called it the Squid game, but the rules barely mattered. It was a fight for survival, pure and simple. I don't remember much about that final game, just flashes, the taste of blood in my mouth, the sound of fists hitting flesh, the look of despair in my opponent's eyes as I made the final move. When it was over, I stood there, trembling, staring at the lifeless body in front of me. They let me go. The money was mine, but the price I'd paid was too high. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. The faces of the people I'd left behind haunted me. The world outside felt hollow, as if I'd left a part of myself back in that place. Sometimes I wonder if I made the right choice, if survival was worth the cost. But then I hear the sound of the doll's voice echoing in my mind. Red light. Green light. And I know I'll never be the same.